everywhere.
Nico Kleynhans in the studio. Good morning, sir.
Good morning. We're going to talk good news. I
Yay.
suppose you better start with rugby.
Well, I'm super excited. I mean, if you haven't heard, then where have you been? But the Springboks are through to the semi-final of the Rugby World Cup being held in France. They got there by defeating the host nation, France, in a nail-biter on Sunday evening. 29 was the final score. And wow, just incredible, absolutely incredible game. Looking forward to playing against England in the semi-final this coming Saturday. I think that's a good news story, and it has an ability to unite the nation. It really does.
I think that's what I like about that particular one. It does unite us. And quite frankly, we need stories to unite our nation at this point in time.
But we've had a bit of bad news lately as well in our communities, in our country, hey?
Yes, I think I was heartbroken, particularly about Hanover Park. During last week, a gang fight broke out, and in the crossfire, a young man was killed.
Terrible.
And I happen to know the family. So I was told that he's been shot, and the funeral was held over the weekend. And a day after the funeral, the granny with the 7-year-old nephew went for a walk to the shop. She was related to the young man who died, and they were involved in crossfire.
Oh, no.
And she was shot and hospitalized. She had a leg amputated. The 7-year-old nephew was murdered by the crossfire. So now we've got one family with that many murders in a weekend.
Such a trauma.
And again, I just thought, this is so much bad news within our city. And then when you look at the international news and what's happening in the warfare zones, you just think it's just, I wanted to get away from bad news.
Yeah.
And I think that's when I decided on this theme.
Yeah.
So we got the rugby news, and I want to look at something on economic news, and then I'm going to project what I would do if I were president for one day.
Brilliant.
I wouldn't survive more than a day as the president.
You sell yourself short there, Nico.
Of what I would want to do. But I think on the BizNews and quoting International Monetary Fund, by next year, the South Africa would get a new title. And that is that we're going to be Africa's largest economy.
Wow.
Because we would have by then have beaten Egypt and Nigeria, and we would then be the largest economy in Africa. So again, because we're looking at things like what's happening at Eskom, and we're looking at the absolute mess in our transport infrastructure, we tend to assume that the whole country is in a mess. That is not true. There are parts of the country that are doing reasonably well. And if you really want good news, it's good to look at the tourism industry. Because tourism at this point in time now creates more than 1 million jobs in South Africa.
Wow.
That means 1 million people are employed solely because of what tourism brings into the country.
That is brilliant.
That is phenomenal. The accommodation providers, that's the Airbnb, the guest houses and the hotels, they clear 2.5 billion rand a year in accommodation.
Wow.
That's what they earn
from
what the tourists bring into the country. And between November and May, 145,000 cruise tourists arrived in our harbor.
Wow.
So that was bringing to Cape Town, plus the 35,000 crew members who came in. Now, that was a direct contribution to the city itself. And into our city, those tourists, just from the harbor, bring 1.2 billion rand into our city. That makes a massive difference.
Big difference.
To restaurants. We notice that because we can't get parking anywhere, and because even our Muizenberg restaurants end up being full. If we add to that what comes in via the airports, 1.7 million international tourists landed in Cape Town over an 8-month period. That's 1.7 million international tourists. And if we look at how many domestic tourists landed, it would add 4 million onto that. So tourism is really big for the Western Cape, for Cape Town, and for South Africa. And in many ways, it is helping us to survive the rest of the bad news that is happening. So now, what would I do to try and spread some more good news if I were president for one day? The first is I would tell every single cabinet minister, as of today, you are going to get load shedding when the rest of the country gets load shedding.
There we
You're
go.
no longer going to be excused.
Yeah.
And you're not going to be excused because you're not royalty and you think you are royalty. You have to experience what everybody in South Africa experiences. So you're going to get load shedding, and you will keep being load shedded until every hospital, every police station, every school, and every magistrate's court no longer needs to receive load shedding.
Brilliant.
Because if they have to receive load shedding and hospitals have to receive load shedding, why should you as a cabinet be excused? So that would be the first change I would make. The second change I would make is our cabinet is bloated, inefficient, and far too many of the cabinet ministers are running disaster zones. If you become a cabinet minister, you are not going to be guaranteed a job for life anymore. If you do not perform, you are going to lose your job. We're going to shrink that department and we're going to save a couple of billion rand. Simply because we're not going to waste time supporting you, your family, and all those freebies that you expect to get from us. All those freebies you get in car allowances, in those freebies you get in air tickets. That is going to stop because we can see our president doesn't have what it takes to shrink his cabinet. He keeps promising to do so, and he doesn't do so. We deserve a better deal. We're not getting it. And then the third thing I would do, I would turn to Treasury immediately and say, you are going to drop the price of petrol immediately by 10 rand a litre. And you're going to do that by reducing the tax by 10 rand a litre.
So it's not actually the cost of the actual material of fuel, it's the taxes.
It's the taxes. You're going to cut that by 10 rand immediately. And all these bloated exercises that you're going through in the background, and all these new projects you want to put, you're going to cut some of that. And you're going to use that to reduce the tax on petrol. That means if you travel to work by taxi, instead of spending 12 to 1,500 rand a month, within a month, you're going to have another 500 rand in your pocket because the price will drop. If you go shopping, the price of your groceries will go down because the transport costs will have dropped as well. And better still, the interest rates will drop because as the petrol price drops, that is the factor that's keeping our inflation rate artificially high.
Sure.
And if the artificially high inflation rate drops, what will then happen is the interest rates will drop. And then everybody who's got debt, whether it's be car debt, credit card debt, or bonds, you will have more money in your pocket because your interest rate goes down. It's not rocket science to make it easier on economics. It takes guts to stop the wastage. And that's what I would change if I were there for one day.
Nico, thank you so much. Really some positive stuff to take away and to seriously think about. Appreciate it so much.